Deborah Layde, I'm Chief Executive of the Seafarers Charity, and as my colleague there said, I am a Director of Maritime UK and also Chair of the Women in Maritime Network. We also have Maritime UK diversity status, which has recently been reconfirmed, and we're one of only 5 organisations in the UK to have had that. There were about 17 signed up. They didn't complete the next stage to go through to the next stage. So why am I mentioning diversity? I think because in the context of working internationally and in international industry, it's vital to our business and importantly our duty of care for our seafarers, because actually culturally we're all incredibly different. And so therefore, as Tom's just been talking about, signs that might present in one culture, for example, for feeling unsafe, having feelings of suicide, might be completely different in another culture. So cultural awareness and understanding of the differences that we all have as human beings is very important. So the Seafarers Charity, just a brief introduction. We're the largest independent grant funder of maritime welfare charities, each year supporting over 600,000 seafarers and their families by investing millions of pounds in seafarers' safety and welfare. And last year we awarded 64 grants to 48 delivery partners, totalling £2.6 million. Most of our funding actually is for merchant seafarers. A lot of people think we actually fund mostly in fish, but that's because it's easier to make changes in fishing because no one has touched them for years. There are people supporting merchant seafarers all over the place, and it's just great that merchant seafarers have this much support. But yes, so 500,000 seafarers internationally merchant navy and 125,000 merchant navy in the UK supported by our grants to organisations last year. But we do support anyone who works at sea, anyone who's paid to work at sea, from workboats to fishers to people working on wind farms. And our mission, quite simply, is to tackle the disadvantages of a seafaring life. Now, that's not to say there aren't so many advantages, but there are disadvantages that are inherent to being away for long periods of time, missing your family, being on a ship where perhaps you've never met anyone else there before, different types of food, etc., etc. So seafaring life, we do recognise, whilst incredibly rewarding, can also have its challenges. We want to drive improvements in the lives of seafarers globally, and we have a wide range of skills in our team. Skills to understand data, drive programs, and look for preventative solutions. We want to look upstream, not just to provide after it's happened, but what can we do to actually change the outcomes? And we work with those we fund. Obviously, there's ICE1 in the room here, and also Mission to Seafarers, and there's others. And we work with those we fund in terms of looking at what are the potential solutions, what things are they seeing. We, as a grant funder, see all of the emerging issues that are coming up through the applications, often before they've even told anyone else, because they're applying to us for funding to solve a particular problem. So we do have a unique way of looking across the whole industry. And we work proactively with delivery partners to create these opportunities for prevention. And I'm going to give one example now, which started back in 2022, when we funded some research into women on cargo ships, and we initiated a campaign to deal with sexual harassment at sea. And the output ended up being a webinar with international maritime welfare charities to consider how they can better support women seafarers. And that included people in this room. After that, another webinar was held in partnership with Nautical Institute to consider the importance of psychological safety to support the retention of women seafarers. And there have been a range of new funded initiatives from our funded charities as a result of this work. Things like more female port visitors, feminine hygiene products, notices, so that you can seek help. And this has all come from the research. But we recognise that female seafarers need more than port chaplains, perhaps, and more than sanitary products. We needed to look at the issues at source and help seafarers on board be allies, especially where a ship's crew may only have one woman on board, as clearly there were issues there around psychological safety. If seafarers do not feel psychologically safe, then accident and errors are more likely to happen. And you guys in this room absolutely know that to be true. Fatigue may be identified as an issue, but actually sleep can be difficult when seafarers are worried about their physical and psychological safety arising from the culture on board. Do they have lockable doors? The Women in Cargo Ships research showed that women were double locking their doors. They were dragging chairs from places to put them up against the doors so that they felt safer and they could just go to sleep at night. So back to the research. UK P&I and Sophia identified that the research had raised all of these issues, and they asked us, what could we do? What could we do to explore, to improve women's safety on board? And we partnered with UK P&I very willingly, as we believed that they would actually add greater reach and durability to our campaign. So we developed and shared an outline proposal with UK P&I to support women's safety via an allyship campaign, because we recognise that allyship is important to improve culture and psychological safety on board and help take a stand against inappropriate behaviours amongst colleagues. And UK P&I then agreed to jointly support and fund this campaign with us. Next step, once they were on board, was to commission ICE1, who Katie was in this room earlier. She's probably still there. You are. Thank you, Katie. Sorry, I'm thinking you were there. Yes, so we then commissioned ICE1 to develop the campaign. And ICE1 took our original idea on women's safety and quite rightly expanded it to a more inclusive allyship campaign to support psychological safety of everybody on board. Why did we choose ICE1? Well, because actually their extensive data and their real-life experiences shared with them by so many female seafarers by Seafarer Help, which we also fund. So it was a good partnership between the three organisations. And ICE1 came up what I believe is not only a memorable campaign, but a very powerful campaign. And I'd like to, if I can, show you one of these videos now.
Life at sea is a journey filled with challenges. For women seafarers, safety, both physical and emotional, is a daily reality. This is not a journey they can take alone, because safety at sea, it takes all of us.
I was trying to hide my gender and not be feminine because I was working mostly with men in that sailing boat. And I saw mostly of the time, even the captain was speaking a lot about sexual relation, about women, look to that, when he was seeing women on the other boats. And also when it was a boat near us, they were like crazy, guys, come out, look, a lot of women, a boat only with women. They were so obsessed, and I was looking to them and hearing their commentary. These men, they are not having any kind of relation, and they can sometimes even be aggressive, you never know.
I have quite a lot of stories about personal safety on board from the past 24 years. Everything from being on a crew boat, having the pilot ask if I had naked pictures, to engineers coming in my cabin when I'm showering, crew coming in my cabin to kiss me goodnight when sleeping, being bought a sex toy and asked if I'm using it. I also still have a few diaries I kept when I was at sea as a cadet. One of the entries I have written is about a second mate wanted me to announce clocks, as he says, the crew will listen more because I am a woman. I told him the crew would not be thinking about clocks when they hear my voice, but who wants to fuck me first?
So I went upstairs, I'm doing the late night shift, and obviously I'm like serving drinks, and there's two couples, whatever, they're in the jacuzzi, there's music, there's drinks, normal. All of a sudden I come back up, they're naked, and then they're kissing, and they gave me a camera and they say, to take photos. So I literally put the camera down, didn't take any photos. And again, we go back to me sharing this with crew members, and it's like a joke. But that is harassment. I'm not there to see you naked. I'm not there to take photos of your sexual pleasure things that you have, kinky things. I think it's very prevalent in the yachting industry, but we don't consider it probably harassment because it's either not physical or vocal.
I wanted to share my positive experience. I have been very fortunate to go at sea with great men who taught me the history of our industry and our union. They still teach me new skills, how to work safely, and they share the stories of the old days at sea. Most importantly, they have taught me the true meaning of camaraderie. I owe my career to my mentors, and I feel very privileged to sail with them.
I would like the male colleagues to understand that we are capable of doing job on board, and all we want is to be accepted by the people around us. By this, we will be able to prove ourselves and sail safer.
You will probably be surprised to hear this, but I think that female seafarers and male seafarers have very much in common when it comes to the problems they experience on board. There is stereotypical thinking about men that they are hard, they're tough, they're indestructible, but in reality, what I've seen over the years working on a helpline is that both genders are very vulnerable at sea.
Every seafarer deserves to feel safe on board because a safe environment fosters trust, unity, and a sense of belonging. Allyship is key to creating a safe and inclusive space for all seafarers. It's about actively supporting and advocating for each other. To be true ally, we must move beyond words and take meaningful actions to promote safety and inclusivity.
Seafarer safety is about more than protocols. It's about creating an environment where every voice is heard and every person is valued. Through support, understanding, and action, we create a safer, more inclusive world for our seafarers.
I think Iceland did a very good job. And I believe this video clip demonstrates why it's important, really important, for everyone to feel psychologically safe. But what can we all do about it? I think, as that video says, we can all be allies. Because again, for the Seafarers Charity, it's important for us to not only highlight the issues as a grant funder, but look at these potential solutions that I mentioned earlier. We just don't want to put a sticking plaster on the problem by delivering support for hardship all the time. How can we start to prevent this hardship more and more? So we want to make these preventative funding interventions which can support this systemic change. And while it's vitally important to have mental health allies, again, it's vitally important to consider what is causing the mental health challenges. And of course, it may simply be the challenges that affect all of us: financial, relationship, health, family, all of those sorts of things. But surely it's much more difficult for seafarers far away at sea on their own with not a support network. So this is why creating a supportive and psychological safe working environment is an important factor in supporting mental health of everyone on board. Because ultimately, a mental health breakdown taken to its most serious consequences can sadly end in suicide at sea. And internationally, suicide tragically remains a huge issue in the maritime industry. According to the study from the International Maritime Health Journal, an estimated 5.9% of deaths at sea attributed to suicide or connected to suicide. Yet when suspicious deaths that were possibly suicide were included, the percentage increases to 18.3%. 18.3%. And surely the shocking statistic cannot be ignored, especially when it's still likely too low. More generally, many in the international maritime industry believe mental health to be inherently rooted in the often unique and challenges faced by seafarers and not an isolated phenomenon. And in addition, suicide occurring on ships is often described as a traumatic experience for the crew, who often blame themselves, thus further contributing to their own mental health issues. So as a charity supporting the welfare and safety of seafarers, it will not be surprising to you that many of the grant applications we receive amplify the very worst of life at sea, whether this is bullying, discrimination, harassment, sexual violence. This is the lens through which myself and our colleagues understand why seafarers experience mental health issues. And in recent years, in response to this, we've been funding new charities such as Safer Waves and Salute Her UK, who support people who have experienced sexual violence at sea. And of course, sexual violence affects both sexes at sea. But sadly, the experience of many women working at sea is their experience of sexual violence is exacerbated when making a formal report, which too many times, far too often, results in their removal from the ship, while the perpetrator is left on board, and they have lost their career, their dream career at sea. Last week, or the week before last, I can't remember now, Private Eye recently featured an experience of a female seafarer being raped at sea, and the Private Eye journalist was absolutely appalled when she spoke to my colleague Tina Barnes. And have a look at her LinkedIn post, because the comments too were quite revealing. But essentially, a female seafarer was raped in her cabin in what should have been the privacy and safety of her own bedroom at her place of work. But poor reporting and an inability to appropriately respond to the reports of rape at sea exacerbate the appalling experience of rape. Made even worse by the typical response to rape of women at sea, i.e. is that she leaves the ship, she loses her job, whilst the engineer, or whoever it might be, sails away. And whilst this was a woman, we absolutely know, undoubtedly, that rape to men happens at sea too. We just don't hear about it very much. Often the shame of being raped at sea will also, man to man, be caused because for another man to have suicidal feelings or certainly mental health issues. Back to the UK, in 2022, the Department for Transport and Ipsos interviewed seafarers, and they said, ultimately, the interviews did not paint a positive picture of life at sea, of suicide among seafarers, the recording and reporting of suicide, and of seafarers' mental health more generally. And the report had two conclusions. Firstly, it said that suicide is, for many reasons, most likely to be under-recorded. And secondly, the report said that we needed more holistic and proactive attempts to tackle the mental health issues challenging seafarers. However, DFT acknowledged that whilst it's impossible to improve recording, and improvements could be part of tackling, whilst it is possible to improve recording, and that improvements could be part of tackling the issue of suicide, focusing just on this should not be to the detriment of addressing seafarers' mental health. Of course, addressing seafarers' mental health is key. And how might we do that? Well, I think the first thing, as we've seen in the video, is allies and the culture on board. And please go and look at ICE1's Allyship campaign resources, and also, obviously, Mission to Seafarers and the many other organisations that support seafarers. And what is an ally? Anyone who acts, listens to, builds trust with, advocates for, or amplifies the voices of marginalised people and groups. They may be recognised as an ally. And the role of allies in mental health is incredibly important. In fact, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, a US-based non-profit, having a supportive network can reduce the risk of mental health crisis. So this is Safe Talk. These are the other things that our wonderful maritime health welfare sector helps us with. The National Alliance said, emotional support from allies can help individuals feel valued and understood, reducing feelings of isolation and improving an overall mental well-being. And we know that mental health and well-being is far too often underrepresented and not recognised in maritime, in much the same way that women are often represented in maritime. So circling back to allies, in the context of mental health, allies can play a pivotal role. So what benefits do allyship have on mental health? Allyship involves advocating for individuals facing behavioural health challenges. But allyship isn't just about speaking up. It's about taking action to foster a more inclusive and supportive environment on board. Allies can also help by normalising conversations around mental health, thus reducing the shame associated, unfortunately, far too often with seeking help for mental health conditions. And allies can also offer crucial emotional support that significantly impacts and improves mental health. So all this talk about allies, I hope that I can count on everyone in this room to be allies to seafarers and mental health. But how can we all be good allies, and what is an effective ally?
How to be an ally? A guide to allyship? No. Wait, hold on. Let's start again. What can you do to make sure everyone feels safe and welcome on board? It starts with paying attention to the experiences of others.
I've had problems accessing appropriate women's health care.
I've had my competency doubted, been excluded and disrespected because I am a woman.
The safety gear we were given didn't fit me properly. There was nothing in my size.
He came into my cabin while I was showering.
Allyship is about making an effort to understand your crewmates and the challenges they might face. And when something is wrong, doing something about it. Who is making the jokes in the crew mess? Who is laughing? Does anyone seem uncomfortable with what's being said? Who is speaking most of the time? Who gets interrupted? Who stays quiet? Are any of your crewmates' opinions overlooked? Are all crewmates treated equally and like the professionals they are? If you're not sure, just ask them. Remember, if you're uncomfortable with what's being said or done, others may be too. You can be an ally. Think of others, speak up, challenge bad behavior, support your crewmates, and make sure that they don't feel alone. The vessel is your home and your workplace, and we all have a part to play in making life at sea better for the whole crew.
In the end, we are all seafarers.
We're all professionals.
We're all part of the team.
We all belong on board.
Play your part. Be that seafarer. Be an ally.
So I hope that we can all take away an action today to be allies to seafarers and to be allies to each other. And to be allies, as it says in that video, we need to educate ourselves. First step in becoming an ally. Learn about the challenges and how you can support them. And then listen and validate when you're talking to people. Remember that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for that reason. Listening is so important. It's one of the most powerful tools you have as an ally. But how many of us have been taught to listen, really listen? It's actually quite tough. And an old boss of mine used to do a regular talk at Balliol College, Oxford, on how to listen. So, So taking action can include advocating for mental health policies, supporting mental health organisations, or simply being there for someone in need and listening. And as much as we all love research, actions actually speak louder than words. And you can be an effective mental health ally and help people to real positive change. So, in terms of where we are, I am always going to be an ally. And I hope you will too. Thank you very much.